Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on a Tuesday. I am Nick Barris. We've got a good show on tap for you. We're going to discuss the future of the state of Tennessee as it relates to our next governor. And hopefully you've been paying attention, and if not, you're learning now, perhaps for the first time, that tonight News Channel 5 is going to be a proud co-sponsor of a governor's forum over at the Curb Center at Belmont University, in connection along with other co-sponsors, SCORE and the Tennessean. And all 6 of the gubernatorial candidates will be there, with one missing, the 7th. We'll talk about who she is and why she won't be there in a moment. We'll open up the phone lines and let you join in the conversation. But, to talk about this, that's about all I really know. Thank goodness for News Channel 5 political analyst Pat Nolan. It's nice to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, man.
I always like it when you come on because I learn so much. And you know what? It's kind of neat. For me, anyway, as a casual observer of politics and a voter, I am more drawn to an open race when there is not an incumbent, and that is the case this year for the governor's race, correct?
That's usually true with any major political race. If you don't have an incumbent, it's an open seat. There's more excitement about it, I guess, not to take anything away from incumbents.
Well, it's because the incumbents always win.
Well, yes, that's been true with our governors. Every governor who's been elected has been elected to a second term, and we've only been able to do that since Alexander's days. But it's been interesting. We've not defeated a governor for re-election since that time. Tennesseans have liked the candidate they had in their first term, and they've returned them.
Right. All right, well, let's just, and we can open up the lines if folks want to join us on this or ask questions about any of the candidates. But tonight's forum, by the way, Pat, and I know you'll be involved with that, and I should let you know, we're going to be streaming a lot of this on newschannel5.com, on Facebook. In fact, I think we're doing that right now on the Plus this morning if you want to reach out to us there. But tonight's focus is going to be more on education.
Yeah, SCORE is an education-related organization. Actually, one of the big names behind it has been former Senator Bill Frist has been very much involved in that. They had a forum similar to this 8 years ago. In fact, they had it at Belmont, very similar to what was done about the same time of year. It's the first time I ever saw Bill Haslam in person, so it was kind of interesting to think back about that 8 years ago, that he was the one of several candidates on stage, because he had I think there was 3, 4, 5 candidates in that field on the Republican side, and Mike McWhorter was running on the Democratic side.
This isn't really as much a debate as a forum.
It's a forum.
Yeah, meaning that there will be questions, and it'll be a chance for each of the candidates to talk about, I suppose, their views on the future of education in Tennessee.
What's different about it is it's the first time these candidates have had a statewide televised forum. And it's the first, if not the first time, it's one of the first times that I can think of that all of them have been on the same stage at the same time. I moderated a forum for a business group a couple of months back, and we interviewed all the candidates. Diane Black again was in Washington that day, had tied up with congressional business, but they all came in individually and did their sessions. They weren't all together on the stage. So just having them all together on the stage, at least for the first time, that a TV audience can see, will be something of a first.
I think this is great, and this is one thing that I'm so glad Channel 5 is part of this, along with SCORE and the Tennessean. It's just, this is a chance for a lot of you out there at least to tune in tonight at 7 o'clock on News Channel 5, and maybe for the first time really get to see and hear from each of the candidates. We should say, and let's go ahead and name the candidates. May Beavers, Diane Black, Randy Boyd, Carl Dean, Craig Fitzhugh, Beth Harwell, and Bill Lee. 5
Republicans, 2 Democrats.
Okay, and one will not be there, and that again is Representative Diane Black, and I guess she's still in Washington, D.C.
She cited, I understand,
early
scheduling difficulties, and that came even before the most recent issues in Washington about the government shutdown and the budget impasse. So that was not directly related to this. She apparently had some other kind of scheduling conflict, was not able to be there.
Okay. Other than that, though, the rest will be there. And so what do you expect? What do you expect tonight?
Well, I think because, again, it'll be moderated by Roy Johnson, and I think they'll focus on education issues. I expect they'll be talking about some of the things that the Governor Haslam's been talking about. They'll be talking about the need to continue to fund schools, to increase our share in that, because Tennessee still lags behind in terms of the per pupil expenditures that we do. They'll talk about some of the things that the governor, he's done quite a bit in the last few years about raising teacher pay, talking about us being the fastest growing state for teacher pay. Of course, a lot of that has to do with how strong the economy is. It'll be a strong economy again right now. In fact, unemployment's gone down 2 percentage points just from where it was a year ago, and we've set some all-time record lows for as long as those records have been kept. So if things stay good and the revenue keeps coming in, I suspect this year when the governor gives his State of the State, which will be next Monday night, I suspect he'll be outlining another pretty hefty increase for K through 12 education. But there are issues involved as well. I mean, there's concerns about how the money that we have is apportioned out. Some of the major cities, Nashville being among them, and I think Knoxville and perhaps Memphis have all joined into a lawsuit against the state saying that the basic education program doesn't divide its money up correctly, that the urban areas ought to be getting more money. We've had several of these kind of lawsuits in the past. There was even some bought by the smaller counties as well. Everybody agrees we need more money for education, but how you divide it up among the counties has always been a source of some dispute, particularly, and it's been in court several times.
It's interesting, by the way, someone on Facebook right now is watching us in Norway. I love it. Good morning, good evening, whatever the time is there in Norway. You know what, lest you think education maybe is not an important topic, this just came out today, and there's all types of organizations that do rankings. This is a Wallet Hub study that basically Tennessee is among the 10 worst in the country for education. The least educated, with enrollment in higher education increasing over 5 million since the year 2000. New research showing positive effects of higher education, how it goes in order to determine the most education the Americans live with. Tennessee right now ranks 43rd in the country as one of the least educated states.
Well, if you're talking about higher education, that's one of the big focuses of Governor Haslam. You'll recall first his Tennessee Promise program, which has gotten some national publicity and exposure because of that, and his drive to 55. The idea being that to get Tennessee up to 55% of its adult population having either some kind of an associate or bachelor's degree from college, we're still pretty far below that. That was a real stretch goal for the governor. He's been pushing it, and the next governor will have to continue that. Maybe one of the questions tonight, what are your plans to continue the drive to 55? How would you change it? How would you keep it the same?
And that's really key. I mean, just if you can put it into context, the importance of education in any state. For instance, I'm just seeing how Nashville is one of the cities, and I still think this is pie in the sky in the running for getting the new Amazon facility here, which would be great. But companies like Amazon and other huge ones, they look at education and the skilled, educated workforce, and if it's not, they're going to go somewhere else.
Well, that's right, and I think that's even for the companies that are here and staying here. They're increasingly having requirements that you have to have that kind of level of education. You have to have some kind of training, or you have to have some kind of degree to be able to do the jobs of the 21st century. You can't just come out of high school and do that anymore. It used to be you could do that, and you can still find some jobs that will work in that area, but increasingly you need the skills, and you can only get that by continuing education.
As we look at the different varying candidates in this, I mean, we can go one at a time through them or how it goes. How much do you think the governor's race is influenced one way or another by what we see in Washington, D.C. politics? And what I'm referring to is some of the polarization there is right now between Democrats and Republicans and what's happening with our president.
Ordinarily, it wouldn't be directly connected, but I think two reasons it will be a little bit more connected this year. First, there is an unexpected open Senate seat in Tennessee. Bob Corker's not seeking re-election, so that now puts that on the ballot, and you've got another Tennessee Congressman, Marsha Blackburn, being at least the leading candidate on the Republican side, and former Governor Phil Bredesen on the Democratic side. Marsha Blackburn and a lot of the Republican candidates this year are running very strongly behind at least supporting the policies of President Trump. Some are going to be a little bit more supporting him personally. But I think Donald Trump's the other reason there'll be a little bit more of that connection, because he has tended to make all politics not necessarily local but connected to each other. So I think we'll see a little bit more of some of that coming up. Tennessee is not like Washington. We obviously have some differences between the two parties. First of all, one of the parties completely dominates here. I mean, the Republicans have supermajorities in both houses and have had them for several years. And chances are that will continue into the next term of the legislature. Interestingly enough, in terms of the governor's chair, we were talking about this before we went on the air. Since 1966, when Buford Ellington was elected governor, he could only serve 4 years at that time. But the Democrats and the Republicans have evenly divided that number of years. Well over 50 years, they have divided it up evenly in terms of number of years they've held the office. Now, you might be surprised to think about that if you're new to Tennessee, this being such a red state, but there have been times over the years. In fact, we've alternated Republicans and Democrats since
why do you think that is? What's different about the governor's race and the way people vote than, say, they vote maybe for their local lawmaker?
Oh, I don't know that it's all that different, but I think Tennessee is more of a moderate state, and I think therefore both and somewhat conservative, but a sort of moderate conservative, and therefore I think they've gone back and forth between the two parties in terms of the governorship. Now we've seen some pretty broad swings here most recently,
right,
and with the Republicans dominating in the legislature, but there were years before that when the Democrats did. So it's sort of gone back and forth. The Republicans are more in the ascendancy, and I would still say at this point they're probably likely to be the favorite going into to November, depending on kind of how things work out the rest of this year and what the political climate's going to be in Tennessee, but also nationally will have some impact down here because it's not a presidential year. So therefore, usually in a non-presidential year, you don't get quite the turnout. But the Democrats are doing everything they can to maximize their turnout because of all the things that have been going on in Washington, and that may have a spillover effect down here. But right now, as people tune in tonight, I suspect the number one candidate that's leading in the race is undecided.
Right.
Particularly on the Republican side.
Right now, not sure.
And the reason I think that may be true is you'd think by this far along in the race that one of the campaigns would be leaking out one of their secret polls that shows them ahead. Well, nobody's doing that. It may be because undecided is leading in the polls right now.
Yeah, we usually see something like that by now, maybe?
And with 5 candidates on the Republican side, it's not necessarily going to take a huge percentage of the vote to be able to win. And remember, in Tennessee, you don't have a runoff provision. So
who gets the most is
if you ever get one more vote than anybody else, you're the nominee.
Then you're the nominee for the Republican or Democrat Party. All right, listen, we got to take a break on that note. When we come back, we'll take some phone calls. If you're on hold, stay there. The number is 737-7587 if you have a question about any of the candidates or tonight's forum or for Pat. No one knows politics in Tennessee like Pat Nolan. So join us after this. We'll continue our conversation. We'll go through each of the candidates as well. So stay with us.
Some